Welcome to WhiskeyCast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie, and this is episode number 1160 for May 3rd, 2026. Coming up in a few minutes.
We felt like it really showed, the influence of that wood has on the whiskey. And so it was an important part of the experimental program for us.
Whiskeys take a long time to mature, and so do some whiskey experiments. Take Buffalo Trace's Single Oak Project. The experiment started back in 1999 with tree selection in the Ozarks, and only now has it resulted in a product ready for the market. In fact, the market selected it from 192 different batches of bourbon in consumer voting. We'll talk with Buffalo Trace master distiller Harlan Wheatley about the new Single Oak Bourbon and the process that created it on this week's WhiskeyCast in depth. And I'll have my tasting notes for it too. We'll also have Behind the Label and much more. The news is next on this week's WhiskeyCast, whiskey's longest-running and most awarded podcast series.
Hey friends, it's Gabriel with Jewers here. If you're watching the U.S. Open this year, or you've got Father's Day coming up and you just want to get it right, there's a bottle that I would keep an eye out for. I'll explain.
Let's get started with the news, and where to start? It's been a busy week. Brown-Forman and Pernod Ricard ended their merger talks this week. Both companies released statements indicating that they weren't able to agree on terms for a so-called merger of equals. Both companies plan to move forward with their existing plans. There's no word out of Louisville on whether the Brown family is considering Sazerac's reported $15 billion offer to buy Brown-Forman and take it private. Drinks industry groups on both sides of the Atlantic are hailing President Donald Trump's decision Thursday to drop the 10% tariff on whiskeys imported from Scotland and the rest of the UK. Trump made the move after a state visit from King Charles and Queen Camilla this week. It leaves Ireland in a difficult position, though. All whiskeys produced on the island are considered Irish whiskeys, but those imported from Northern Ireland fall into the UK's tariff-free status, while imports from the Republic of Ireland are subject to the European Union's 15% tariff rate. Beckley, the family-owned Mexican parent of Proximo Spirits, reported a 67% slump in net profits during the first quarter of the year. The decline is being blamed on lower sales in the U.S. and Canada, which together account for more than half of Beckley's annual sales. The decline was dominated by lower tequila sales, but Beckley reported declines across all of its product segments, including Irish whiskeys and Stranahan's American single malts. Remy Cointreau reported positive annual sales this week for the first time since 2023, but still fell short of analyst forecasts. The owner of Bruichladdich Single Malt Scotch and Westland American Single Malt was hit hard by tariffs and inflation in the U.S. and China, its two largest export markets. The Iran war is threatening to hurt whiskey makers. The war has caused setbacks to the travel retail market in the Middle East, and the rise in oil prices is raising costs for bottles, grain, and other raw materials. LVMH chief executive Bernard Arnault warned analysts that his company's recovery depends on a quick end to the war, which he says could spiral into a global catastrophe. In other news, the Supreme Court could be asked to decide the fate of home distilling in the U.S., That's after a federal appeals court upheld the 1868 law banning home distilling. The ruling conflicts with another appeals court ruling last month, declaring the ban unconstitutional. Two athletes unveiled partnerships with whiskey brands this week. The WNBA's Kelsey Plum worked with Maker's Mark on a private selection release. Yam Jam by Kelsey Plum will be available in limited amounts. There's no word on pricing. Formula One driver Charles Leclerc is the inspiration behind the first 16-year-old Chivas Regal blended scotch. 16 is the number he carries on his Ferrari. The blend includes 16 whiskeys, all at least 16 years old, and it's being released in Miami this weekend exclusively at Miami airport shops to coincide with the U.S. Grand Prix in Miami. Jack Daniel's is continuing its relationship with F1 team McLaren Racing with the new Jack Daniel's and McLaren Halo MK1 Tennessee whiskey. It's a special version of Jack Daniel's made using barrel staves, seasoned for an extended period, and the whiskey was bottled at 58.7% ABV. That's a tribute to Bruce McLaren's first race car, the number 58 Austin 7. It comes in a container designed to replicate the Halo safety device used on F1 cars and will be available in select global markets. No word on pricing. We're a month away from the U.S. Open Golf Tournament at Shinnecock Hills on Long Island, and Dewar's has released its annual Champions Edition 19-year-old blended Scotch. This year's edition is finished in Cabernet Franc wine casks from Long Island's Wolfer Estate Vineyard and is priced at $79.99 a bottle. I received a sample this week and will have my tasting notes for it later on. And we need to remind you that Dewar's is a sponsor of WhiskeyCast. Other new releases to mention this week, Blue Run Spirits has released a new bourbon to kick off its Blueprint series. It's a blend of 2 mash bills, one wheated and the other a low rye mash bill. It's priced at $70 a bottle. I received a sample this week and will have my tasting notes for it soon at whiskycast.com. Jephthah Creed Distillery has released Bruce's Blue, a bourbon made using a blue corn varietal developed by Bruce Nethery, the husband of Jephthah Creek master distiller Joyce Nethery. It's available at the distillery in Shelbyville, Kentucky, and at select Kentucky retailers for $60 a bottle. Michter's is releasing a cask-strength version of its US 1 sour mash whiskey. It'll be an annual release, with this year's version bottled at 55.75% ABV. Look for it at a recommended retail price of $120 a bottle. The Virginia Distillery Company is launching the Split Barrel Project, a first-ever blend of American single malt whiskey with Kentucky bourbon. The first release is a collaboration with Bardstown Bourbon Company, which supplied a 4-year-old bourbon to be blended with 5-year-old Virginia Distillery Company single malt. The goal was to create a whiskey that will draw bourbon lovers into American single malts. It'll be available through the Virginia Distillery Company's website and at select retailers around the U.S. There's no word on pricing. 15 Stars is celebrating America's 250th anniversary with the release of 2 Kentucky County whiskeys. Kentucky County was the original western frontier county of Virginia and was eventually split off to form the state of Kentucky in 1792. There's a 6-year-old straight bourbon priced at $37.99 a bottle and a 12-year-old American whiskey. It's a blend of straight bourbon with American whiskey priced at $57.99 a bottle. Sazerac's Last Drop Distillers has released its 2026 collection, including a 60-year-old single-grain whiskey from the long-closed Carsbridge Distillery. It's priced at 3,700 pounds a bottle. There's also a 25-year-old Trinidad rum from the closed Caroni Distillery. It's priced at 1,750 pounds a bottle. And finally, the American Craft Spirits Association has launched a certified craft seal program for its member distillers. They'll be able to display the certified craft logo on bottles and promotional materials. The goal is to help consumers identify craft whiskeys in an increasingly crowded marketplace. We'll have more on this story next week. You can keep up with the latest whiskey news all week long at whiskycast.com and in the WhiskeyCast community app. Let's check the calendar now and see what's happening around the world of whiskey. Tickets are still available for the Whiskey Exchange's Adelphi Rarities Tasting Thursday night at the Great Portland Street Shop in London. Clackmannonshire's Whiskey Festival is this Saturday in Clackmannanshire, Scotland, along with the Spirit of Toronto Festival in Toronto. Maltstock Down Under is next weekend at the Ratho Farm in Boswell, Australia, from the 15th through the 17th, and the Somerton Whiskey Festival is May 16th in St. Albans, England. The Whiskey Exchange's Great Portland Street Shop hosts Dr. Blake Layfield of Maker's Mark for a Star Hill Farm tasting May 20th. And Moonshine University's next Stave and Thief Society Executive Bourbon Steward class is on May 22nd in Louisville, Kentucky. If you're organizing a whiskey event, let us know about it. We'll add it to the calendars at whiskeycast.com and in the WhiskeyCast community app.
Every year, we've been releasing a Dewar's 19-Year-Old Champions Edition alongside the U.S. Open, a limited release whiskey that's directly tied to the tournament. Now, 19 years is not a number you see every day on a bottle of whiskey, but in golf it kind of makes sense. The 19th hole, that round after the round. The stories usually are a little better than some folks' scorecards. This year, the championships at Shinnecock Hills in Long Island, and instead of just putting that on the label and calling it a day, we build it into the whiskey. After 19 years of maturation, this whiskey's finished in Cabernet Franc wine casks from Wolfer Estate, right there on Long Island. So there's a real connection to the place, not just in name, but in the liquid itself. On the palate, you'll get some of that red fruit, with a bit of floral lift and a touch of spice from the higher ABV, but it still drinks like Dewar's. Honeyed, soft oak, balanced, nothing is out of place. It also lands right around Father's Day, making it an easy gift. Limited release, once a year, with Shinnecock Hills on the bottle. Great for golf fans, but just really a well-made whiskey. Keep an eye out for it. Copyright 2026, Dewar's is a trademark. Imported by John Dewar & Sons Company, Coral Gables, Florida. Blended Scotch whiskey, 43% alcohol by volume.
WhiskeyCast In Depth is brought to you by Glendalough Irish Whiskey. Back in 2011, I was invited to Buffalo Trace Distillery for the launch of the Single Oak Project, probably one of the biggest experiments ever in the bourbon world. Back in 1999, they selected 96 trees in the Ozarks to be turned into 192 barrels, with a goal of examining the influence of wood on whiskey. It was much more than that, though. They tested 7 different variables, including the size of the grain in the wood, the type of rickhouse, the char level, and even whether wood from the top or bottom half of a tree makes a difference in the flavor. Over a 4-year period starting in 2011, they released the Single Oak Project bourbons 12 at a time every 3 months and let consumers post their tasting notes and ratings online. When it was all said and done, barrel number 80 was the top-scoring barrel. It was a rye-forward mash bill, with staves seasoned for 12 months from the bottom half of a tree, with 13 rings of growth per inch. A number 4 char barrel stored in a concrete floor warehouse for 8 years, and an entry proof of 125. It's been about 10 years since the project ended, and now Buffalo Trace has released the Single Oak Bourbon. It's a whiskey that replicates Barrel 80's characteristics down to the last variable. I talked with Buffalo Trace Master Distiller Harlan Wheatley Friday on a Zoom call. Welcome back to WhiskeyCast, Harlan. It's been a while.
Yeah.
Tell me about the Single Oak Project. This started back in 1999, if I remember right.
Yeah, we had some ideas floating around about the effects of the trees and the environment, and we developed some testing with Independent Stave, and our Ronnie Edens, our warehouse manager at the time, who ended up with about 54 years, I believe it was. I should know that, but 54 years of service to our as a warehouse manager for us, went to the Ozark Mountains and spent a few days going around tagging trees and picking trees and talking with the loggers and documenting locations and all these things. So, that's been 20 years ago. And we did all that, did 192 separate barrels based on 192 divided by 2 would be 81 trees. and 91 trees, right?
91 trees.
Yeah.
Or 96 trees.
96 trees. Try to get it right. Yeah. So we did all those, and then we isolated the different recipes. We had 7 variables, and we did different recipes, different warehouses, different techniques to determine what we thought the differences are between these trees. And then we tasted and sampled all these barrels and sent them out to the public to get feedback. And we got feedback. I don't remember the data, but it was hundreds of thousands of data entry points. And we got the feedback that everyone seemed to like barrel number 80 the best of all the barrels, 192 of them. And so we went off. It took us 8 years to age the whiskey, really. So it was 9 years, really. But so 8 years to age the whiskey. It took us 4 years to get the feedback documented and figured out, what we thought the favorite was, number 80. And
that was because you put it out as a batch, a dozen at a time over 4 years.
Yes, that's right. And once we figured that out, then we replicated the recipes and put that whiskey away. And we've been waiting for 8 years for that to age. And so this is the first release of that, style bourbon that matches barrel number 80. And, so far so good. And we're not done with the experiment. We're still looking at other things. But we are officially graduating the single oak project into a full-time product, right?
So it will be a permanent release.
Yes. So every year we've been putting barrels away based on that plan.
Why was this type of experimentation so important for Buffalo Trace?
Well, for us, we have a pretty extensive experimental program where we look at everything from recipes to, processes to environments. One of the things that we did some experiments with wood, but we didn't really do anything to this extent. So it was just a natural extension of our experimental program to allow us to focus on how much the wood matters. We know that grain matters, we know the environment matters, we know the process matters, but we wanted to see, what happens if you use the top of the tree, the bottom of the tree, or if it's so many growth rings per inch or whatever it is. And so we felt like it really showed, the influence of that wood has on the whiskey. And so it was an important part of the experimental program for us.
What did you learn?
Well, it does matter. The wood does matter. We learned that if you want to be consistent with quality, which we do all the time, we have to be very selective in our trees, and you have to make sure you diversify your tree selections. So if you go down into a valley and you only cut trees in that valley and then you went and made whiskey out of that valley, it's going to have that profile based on those trees. So what you want is have a few trees from the hill, a few trees from the valley, a few trees on the other side of the hill, and diversify that wood. That way you get a consistent, bourbon or whiskey. And I think some people would say that's intuitive, but we proved it that if you don't do that, it will definitely influence the whiskey.
I remember Mark Brown saying at the time that this came out with the first release of the Single Oak Project that the goal was to create the perfect bourbon. Did you do it?
The answer to that is always no. You know, we do still believe the best perfect bourbon has not been produced, and we're always searching for all the answers. You know, and no, everybody knows that you're not going to ever have all the answers. So the Holy Grail, we call it, is still out there, and it may be a sad day if you ever. What happens if you do find the Holy Grail? What do you do then? I don't know, but we're going to continue to search and continue to try to learn, and that's the fun part of the job.
Did any of the experimentation that you did with Single Oak Project affect your work on the mainstream whiskeys?
Well, that description that I gave you earlier did influence the way we discuss trees and harvests and staves and stave selections because we know how important that diversified selection is. So that was an easy one. We did understand the influences based on tree location, tree growth rings, top half, bottom half, all those things too. So it gives us the ability to select whiskeys based on that. We know, I think for our everyday, we call it our legacy brands, we know about making sure that stave selection is diversified is the main thing.
How do you feel seeing this finally come to release?
Well, we have a few experiments that are pretty long term. I think most people wouldn't sign up for a 20-year experiment, but it is a sense of a sense of being able to accomplish a project from the start, and so I'd say a sense of accomplishment and pride. You know, it's always about pride for us because every person on our team is involved in making these products, and anytime we put something together like this, one thing is important on the back of the label. You know, we stamped RE on the back of that label in honor of Ronnie Edens, and on every bottle we sell, his initials are on the back, and so there's a lot to it for us. It's I'd say pride's probably the number one.
I have to ask, was Barrel 80 your personal favorite?
Oh, absolutely. It was definitely the best all around. It had the things that traditionally people like with bourbons. I mean, it wasn't anything outside the norm, but I'd say definitely I'm kind of a rye bourbon. I lean toward that. I mean, I like all bourbons, but a rye bourbon is what I drink when I casually drink, and that's what I prefer.
Yeah, explain the rye bourbon designation for this, because this was as opposed to a wheated bourbon, right? Yeah.
Well, there's two. Of all the bourbons on the market, generally there's two main recipes, and the rye bourbon has to have 51% corn to be a bourbon, and the balance, people call them small grains. The balance of the small grain would be rye and malted barley, and so they call it rye bourbon. So if you say the word bourbon, that means the majority has to be corn.
Right.
So if you say rye bourbon, it has to have rye in it. And then people take the rye out and then put wheat in. So most of the time it's red winter wheat that people use. And so it's a wheated bourbon. Again, majority of the grain has to be corn, and then you can put wheat, and most people use malted barley. And then some people like us, we do 4 grains. So we do majority corn, and then we put rye and wheat and malted barley. together, and that way you get a little bit of best of both worlds. If you like rye and wheat, then it's a pretty nice combination.
And you tested wheated bourbons as part of the Single Oak project, right?
We did, and they, a lot of them turned out pretty well. We have some other things like we tested for mouthfeel and intensity and different things, but the wheats were good, but they weren't the favorite. So
which is
we went
unusual
with the
because
public. So what I like to say is, if people don't like the taste profile, you have to blame the public, not me.
it's unusual because Buffalo Trace is known for its wheated bourbons.
Well, we hopefully are known for wheat and rye bourbons. We have our flagship is rye bourbon with Buffalo Trace, but we do have a few pretty good wheaters out. People call them wheaters. There's some pretty good wheaters out there.
Let me close on this. Who's your pick for the Derby tomorrow?
Let's see. My pick for the Derby. That's a good question, and I'm getting ready to tell you the answer. I have to bet on Chief Wallaby because my mother-in-law's favorite drink is a Wallaby Darn, and Renegade's the heavy favorite, so I probably won't bet on him. So I'm going to go with Chief Wallaby and maybe Further Ado in a box.
We'll see how it comes out. Thanks again for doing this, Harlan.
No problem.
Fortunately for us, Harlan is better at making whiskey than picking horses. Golden Tempo won the Derby on Saturday. The Single Oak Bourbon will be available in limited quantities with a recommended retail price of $74.99. And that's Whiskey Cast in Depth, brought to you by Glendalough Irish Whiskey.
Our story begins in the wilds of County Wicklow, the Garden of Ireland, a place where nature moves slowly and meaningfully. Some whiskies blend in. Glendalough Double Barrel stands apart. I'm Rowdy Rooney, head distiller here at Glendalough, and I personally oversee our whiskey making process from start to finish. We do things slowly, and we do them right. We start with a smooth, single-grain Irish whiskey. We age it in flame-charred American oak for soft vanilla and a honeyed depth. Then we finish it in Oloroso casks from a small bodega in Spain. Casks we season and ship ourselves to make sure the wood is still alive with character when it arrives. That kind of care gives Glendalough Double Barrel its rich layers of dried fruit, warm spice, and signature smoothness. This is a whiskey at its own pace, and it's worth every second. This is Glendalough Double Barrel, crafted to stand apart.
This week's tasting notes are brought to you by Lost Lantern Whiskey. Let's start off with the Single Oak Bourbon from Buffalo Trace. Once again, it's an 8-year-old bourbon bottled at 45% ABV. The nose has touches of caramel, butterscotch, honey, soft spices, and sweet oak. The taste has a good balance of sweetness and spice, with caramel and butterscotch balanced by black pepper and cinnamon, leading into a long, smooth finish. I'm scoring the Single Oak Bourbon from Buffalo Trace a 93. Next up, let's look at the new Dewar's 19-year-old Champions Edition. Once again, it's finished in red wine casks from Long Island's Wolfer Estate Vineyard and bottled at 43% ABV. The nose has plums, raisins, red grapes, and dried flowers. The taste has notes of fresh berries, plums, a touch of white pepper, red grapes, and raisins, while the finish is long and fruity. I'm scoring the 2026 Dewar's Champions Edition a 92. And once again, Dewar's is a sponsor of Whiskey Cast. Now let's take a look at an exclusive bottling from the Whiskey Exchange, the 2017 Mars Kamagatake single cask release. This one was distilled at the Kamagatake Distillery near Nagano and matured in a warehouse on Yakushima Island off the south coast of Japan. It's bottled at 57% ABV, and the nose has dried fruits, kiwi fruit, hints of citrus, ginger root, and vanilla. The taste is fruity with citrus, kiwi, apricots, sandalwood, white pepper, honey, and dried flowers. The finish is long and citrusy with a lingering touch of spice, and I'm scoring it a 92. Angel's Envy has released this year's cask strength bourbon and rye whiskeys. The bourbon is finished as always in port wine barrels, and it's bottled at 58.9% ABV. The nose has touches of chocolate-covered cherries, salted caramel, red apples, and a soft oakiness. The taste has notes of cherries, apples, red wine, a touch of white pepper, and oak tannins, while the finish is long, jammy, and oaky with a touch of citrus. I'm scoring the 2026 Angel's Envy Cask Strength Bourbon a 93. Now the rye, it's finished in Caribbean rum casks, and it's 10 years old. It's bottled at 55.8% ABV. The nose has brown sugar, dates, vanilla, and a hint of dill. The taste has notes of ginger root, baking spices, rum notes, and a touch of molasses. The finish is long with a nice balance of oak tannins, molasses, and dried fruits. I'm scoring the Angel's Envy 2026 Cask Strength Rye a 92. This week's tasting notes are brought to you by Lost Lantern Whiskey. Serious about whiskey? Lost Lantern is too. Two whiskey nerds built Lost Lantern as a curator, not a distiller, tracking down distinctive casks from standout American producers. Think of Lost Lantern as an adventure in discovering the best American whiskey, each bottle exploring a new distillery, a new story. It's proof that not all who wander are lost. Discover the whiskey producers you should know about with Lost Lantern, shining a light on the independent spirit. Let's open up the inbox now and see what people are talking about this week. I love it when you post what you're drinking in the Whiskey Cast community app. C. Don posted this. I'm in Columbia, and Buchanan's is incredibly popular here. I forgot how good the 18-year is. If you haven't had it in a while, I highly recommend it. Mr. Pye posted a photo of a Henry McKenna bottled in bond bourbon with this note, a classic bottled in bond this evening. Enjoy your weekend, friends. And speaking of Heaven Hill, J.D. Hostetler posted a photo of the 2017 Evan Williams Single Barrel Bourbon with this note, seemed like a good choice for Kentucky Derby Day. Cheers. And Dramamine shared a photo of the 2008 Johnny Walker Director's Blend with the following, Friday night NBA playoffs with a 2008 JW Director's Blend. Truly special and once in a lifetime. The legendary Dr. Jim Beveridge put together a master-class blend. I don't expect it to ever taste better. As you might guess, the end of the import tariffs on Scotch whiskey brought a few comments, some snarky, some skeptical. For instance, Law School Drunk posted this, taking bets on how fast prices will decrease. I'm betting never. And Juan Cruz posted, the tariff will be back as soon as something happens that upsets the White House. Dan posted from Scotland, who knew all we needed to do was get King Chuck on the case? Expect some more royal specials released from Scotch distilleries soon. And Dan22 chimed in, good old Charles, I'll pour a dram of Lafroig, his favorite, in his honor. And finally, Peter Sprunger in Washington had a comment on last week's episode and the Behind the Label segment. Mark, as usual, another great episode. But as someone who works to promote safety standards, I have to quibble with you equating Mr. Red Tape and setting standards. I think it is safe to say that we all want confidence and accountability of the stated ABV on the bottle, and at the same time we do not want bottlers to go through a complicated procedure, i.e. lots of red tape, to adhere to the standards. A topic for a future Behind the Label could be to dig into the process and ask how much time would bottlers save if the standards were doubled, and how much time it would cost bottlers if the tolerance was halved. That's a good idea, Peter, and I was being facetious with my reference to Mr. Red Tape. If you have a comment, question, or a suggestion, I'd love to hear from you. Download the free Whiskey Cast community app from your app store and join the conversation. You can also find us on social media. Look for Whiskey Cast on X, Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram, and Facebook. The email address is comments@whiskeycast.com. Let's close out the show now with Behind the Label, our look at the history, science, and people who make whiskey unique. Sadly, we have to say goodbye to another old friend this week. Derek Mather was the owner and chef at the Artisan Restaurant in Wishaw, Scotland. He was known for his obsession with Bruichladdich whiskies. His Octomore barbecue sauce is the best I've ever had, and he built up a world-class collection of whiskies at the Artisan, more than 3,000 at one point. That's enough to qualify the Artisan for Guinness World Record status, but Derek told me back in 2017 that it would cost a lot of money to certify the record, and he'd rather spend the money on whiskey for the restaurant instead. Derek died suddenly last Sunday. He was just 51. After I posted the news in the app the other day, Keith Duncan posted this: "Such sad news. I was with him last Wednesday and never imagined this would happen. Rest in peace, big man." And Rick at the Whiskey Zone probably puts it best. He was a big man with a big heart, but left a lasting legacy, the sign of a life well lived. Our condolences go out to Derek's wife Fiona, their entire family, and all of Derek's many friends around the world. If you have something you'd like us to look at on an upcoming episode, just get in touch with us. That's all for this episode of Whiskey Cast. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskeycast.com. That's also where you'll find the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the calendar of events, and a complete archive of our past episodes going all the way back to 2005. We'd love to hear from you. Look for Whiskey Cast on Blue Sky, X, Instagram, Threads, and Facebook. Our email address is comments@whiskeycast.com.
Our latest release of Dewar's 19-Year-Old Champions Edition, finished in Cabernet Franc wine casks, made for the 19th hole, and one worth having around when you get there. Keep an eye out for it. Cheers, friends.
Whiskey Cast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2026, and comes to you each week from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.